Hi, it's Dwyer. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. It's January 1st, 2024. Let's start the year with 6 questions for boxing. But first, remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Let me also say, too, we all have our own questions. I'm just one boxing fan here. Right in the comment section of this video, if you have questions that I haven't asked, that you want asked of boxing, go ahead and feel free to leave those questions in the comment section of this YouTube video. I get the feeling a few people watch these videos, right? I've noticed we'll raise some points here. I'm sure others on YouTube raise their own points, and I'll notice people in boxing will provide answers within a few days. Fighters themselves will take the challenge and will say, hey, I want to fight this guy. No doubt we're helping the dialogue. So, with that said, let's raise some questions for boxing, right? The cognoscente never have to say that they are answering our questions. All we're hoping for here is to get people thinking and to have folks feel that they can answer them later. So, the first question, is this the year that someone severely tests light heavyweight champion Arthur Beterbiev? Folks, he's a future Hall of Famer who beat Usyk in the amateurs. For the record, believe it or not, Sean Porter did as well, right? Beterbiev beat Usyk in the amateurs. He has knocked out fighters like Marcus Brown, Joe Smith, and Anthony Yarde as a professional, right? He has been in the sport for years. He's scheduled to fight Callum Smith this month. But yet, even though he's been fighting big names, including knockout artists, Beterbiev still has a 100% knockout ratio. Beterbiev has openly said that he's willing to fight Dimitri Bivol. We understand that in Saudi Arabia recently, they had a fight between Bivol and Lyndon Arthur. You get the feeling the Saudis would like to see the situation at light heavyweight unified, right? Understand, too, Beterbiev has even said that he's willing to fight David Benavidez, who is unbeaten at 168 pounds. Now, Father Time waits for no one. Understand that Beterbiev, as I make this video, is 38 years old and has a birthday later this month on which he'll turn 39. Is someone going to step up and take the fight to this future Hall of Famer? Is it going to be Callum Smith, or is it going to be someone else? Let's be clear here, too. When I say Beterbiev KO'd Joe Smith, he did so in Joe Smith's backyard, right? He's in the tri-state area. When I say he KO'd Anthony Yarde, understand this is the champion who crossed the Atlantic to fight Anthony Yarde in Anthony Yarde's backyard, and he got the KO. This is a real champ. He's in his late 30s. He seems to be willing to take on all comers. He's even joked about fighting Usyk again, right? Although there's a huge weight gap there. Is someone going to test him in 2024? Let's ask a second question. Is Jaime Munguia ready? We know he's unbeaten. We know he's a slugger. We know he has some great highlights. We know he's a knockout puncher. But we also know his next fight is against John Ryder. Now, Ryder's story is a boxing story. Me and a lot of other people saw Ryder beat Callum Smith, right? Let's be clear here. we saw Ryder beat Callum Smith. Of course, the judges saw a different fight, right? Again, it's a boxing story. The judges saw a different fight. Callum Smith, as you can imagine, was heavily favored at the time. And of course, Callum Smith was awarded the decision. So John Ryder doesn't have Callum Smith's scalp on his resume, but he was undaunted. He knew he could hang against elite opponents. So he goes to Canelo's backyard. Now let's be clear here. Canelo hits harder than people think. Understand, Canelo used to spar against heavyweight Frank Sanchez. I'm not kidding. And Canelo is defensively blessed. Canelo can hide his head with the best of them. Right? It's very hard to hit Canelo in the head. Not only that, because of Canelo's body punching capability, look at his fight against Liam Smith. Because of Canelo's power, in fact, think of the end of the Billy Joe Saunders fight. Saunders' one loss as a professional. It's Canelo hitting him with some kind of uppercut when Saunders is hanging around the pocket too much. And of course, it ends up fracturing Saunders' eye socket. That's the level of punching power Canelo has. But yet, here is John Ryder. And Ryder is hanging with Canelo. Canelo's winning the fight, right? Canelo knocks Ryder down. Ryder doesn't have 5 fans in the stands. But yet, Ryder is hanging around. And this is that fight. This is one of the recent Canelo fights where you got to round 10, and suddenly the opponent starts winning the rounds. Doesn't Ryder finish strong against Canelo? So now, let's just say too, Canelo is defensively blessed. In my eyes, Jaime Munguia is defensively challenged. Right? You look at Jaime, and there are moments in his fights, and Jaime hits hard. Understand, it's tough hanging around the pocket against Jaime Munguia, who's really a mid-range hooker. Right? It's very hard to hang around the pocket, but if you do, you're going to notice that there are times when Jaime Munguia, after punches, is defenseless. Right? Is Munguia, who, in my opinion, and let's be hard here, has been a protected fighter. Right? You know, a big step up for Munguia was when he fought Derevianchenko. Right? Munguia is not the guy who's in the ring fighting the biggest names. Right? Is Munguia ready for an underrated John Ryder, who has already been in the ring with Callum Smith and Canelo, and is not going to be overwhelmed by the moment, is not going to look at Jaime Munguia and think to himself, my God, I'm in the ring with Jaime Munguia. Right? He's already been in the ring with better than Jaime Munguia. Right? Is Munguia ready for the challenge? Let me also point out, too, that the world changes. The narrative of boxing changes if Ryder pulls the upset. Let me back up an extra step here. One of the best things to ever happen to Floyd Mayweather, let's name a legend, was the fact that Canelo went on to be an all-time great. Right? Understand, when you beat a guy, and Floyd beats Canelo when Canelo's unbeaten. When you beat a guy, and that guy goes on to great things, which is what Canelo has done, right? That shines a bright light back on you. When you think about the Mayweather legacy, right? When you're thinking about the fact that Mayweather beats Oscar, Mayweather beats Pacquiao, right? An argument can be made that Canelo is the biggest scalp on Mayweather's resume. Right? You hear that it's Mayweather who beats an unbeaten Canelo. And you say, my God, Mayweather fought some people, didn't he? Mayweather beat some very high quality people, didn't he? Well, understand, if Ryder beats Munguia, that's going to shine a huge light back on both Canelo and Callum Smith. In fact, let's be real here. It'll shine a huge light on Canelo, right? That Callum Smith fight, it's still debatable who won that fight, in my eyes, right? Canelo did beat Ryder. Understand, too, right now, no one's calling for a Canelo-Ryder rematch. There isn't the urgency. If Ryder beats Munguia, and if he does it definitively, and this is the cagey vet type who you need to worry about, right? If he beats Munguia, if Munguia is not ready, if that's the answer to the question, folks, there's going to be an outcry for Canelo against Ryder. Understand, everyone wants Canelo right now. Benavidez, Morrell, Janabek, Jamal Charlo. They all want Canelo. If you're Canelo, you might take comfort in fighting a guy who has just beaten Jaime Munguia, who you've already beaten. Right? Food for thought. Let's continue. Do we get a Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk rematch? Folks, life is fluid, right? You show up to a buddy's wedding, and of course that buddy is thinking that he's going to be married for life, right? For life. That buddy might be talking to you about his desire to have a big family, about where he and his new wife are going to live. Right now, you hope it happens. You're at the wedding. You're saying, hey, man, I hope Abdul has the life he wants. Right? You're on his team. You want happiness for him. You want the best for him. But you're looking at his wife. You're wondering if it's going to happen. And let's just say you privately know that about half of all marriages don't work out. Now, Tyson Fury is about to hit the altar with Usyk. We're hearing that they have a nice, neat 2-fight deal. Right? The fight and then the rematch. Everyone's assuming that both of those fights take place. Right? You and I understand that while some rematches take place, right, Anthony Joshua just fought Usyk twice. You and I also understand that these fighters are not robots. That the injuries they suffer physically and mentally are real injuries. Right now, folks, this Fury Usyk, we'll call it duopoly, right? And we're being charitable. Could flow one of many ways. But here's what we know with certainty. Both guys are unbeaten, right? The one draw on Fury's record is highly questionable, right? Fury makes a comeback after being out of the sport, right? He makes the comeback. He fights Wilder. We know he loses 2 of the rounds, right? The 2 rounds he gets knocked down in. I think there's an open question on whether he loses any other rounds. But the judges, in a fight in Wilder's backyard, call the fight a draw. Okay, fine. But what we know with certainty is that Fury fell apart earlier, didn't he? He wins the heavyweight title. Wins the title from Vladimir Klitschko. And then starts doing interesting things. right? He shows up wearing a Batman outfit. Fury, at his best, has talked about his mental health challenges. He's talked about how he was drinking too much, right? Fury's a guy who, let's just say, has fallen apart in the past. Now, somebody is going to lose their perfect record here, right? These guys have never had a loss as a professional. Understand how nose-bleedingly high the standards are here, right? Fury beats Vladimir Klitschko, a guy who had the title at different times. He then falls apart, is out of the sport for years, right? He's out of the sport. He makes the comeback. He's in the ring with the WBC champion. Think about that. Right, folks, the standards here are incredibly high. He was in the ring with Wilder, I believe, his third fight back. He's in the ring with the biggest puncher in the heavyweight division. Folks, don't believe me. Look at the KO percentages. Right? I know many of you are saying, gee, is Wilder a Hall of Famer? Understand, at one point, Bermane Stiverne fought Chris Arreola for the heavyweight title. Would it shock you to learn that Wilder ends up fighting both of them, ends up stopping both of them? Right? Lakovic, at one point, Serhij Lakovic held the WBO heavyweight title. Folks, Wilder stopped him. Understand, the Bermane Stiverne rematch, Stiverne doesn't make it out of the first round. I don't believe Lakovic makes it out of the first round. Tyson Fury fights him his third fight into his comeback. Now, here's what could happen. Fury, who, let's face it, is coming off his arguably career worst performance, right? At least the draw was against a reigning heavyweight champ. How do you explain getting dropped by an MMA guy in his first fight? Right? The Francis Ngannou fight's troubling. Now, if you believe anyone can get a lucky punch on a champ, right? I once saw Larry Holmes on the canvas against Ronaldo Snipes, right? Sure, guys can get dropped off punches. How do you explain the fact that Ngannou lands more power shots than Tyson Fury over 10 rounds? Let's say Fury didn't take the fight seriously. Let's say Fury gets dropped, I believe it's in round 3. Folks, there's 7 more rounds. 7 more rounds. If Fury got off the canvas disgusted at himself, disgusted at his opponent, you would have expected what happened to Stanley Ketchel after he knocked down Jack Johnson. You would have expected the champ to get up and to be upset and to let the world know he was upset. Fury gets off the canvas, and then Fury gets outboxed some rounds. The other guy ends up landing more power shots. So let's think this through. If Usyk shows up, and Fury just isn't who he has been, if Fury looks like a guy who just struggled against an opponent in his first boxing match, if Fury gets out-hit here, if Usyk is just too fluid, Usyk, lefty, I understand. Fury is ambidextrous. Let's be real here. Fury's not good enough as a southpaw to go southpaw against Usyk, a legitimate southpaw. I would argue that Usyk has the hand speed advantage. If Fury loses this match, either on the scorecards or, and let's be real here for a moment, by stoppage, right? No one can tell me after the last minute of round 12 of Usyk's master class against Anthony Joshua the first time that Joshua wasn't on the verge of getting stopped. Let's say Usyk decides, this is my moment. Let's say Usyk's Billy Khan, and Usyk decides, I have this guy. This is my moment. Now I'm going to put the exclamation point at the end of the sentence, only unlike Billy Khan against Joe Louis. Let's say Usyk pulls it off. Batters Fury like he battered Joshua in the 12th round. Are you sure? Are you sure that Fury is going to be in the state of mind needed to have a rematch with Usyk this year? Let's say the opposite happens. Because Fury's telling us Usyk's too small. Let's say Usyk looks too small. Right? After all, Usyk is a guy who at one point fought and lost to Sean Porter as an amateur. Usyk is a guy who got dropped by Arthur Beterbiev as an amateur. Right? Usyk's a guy who had a very hard time as a professional heavyweight against Derek Chisora. Let's say Fury is right. And he comes out and he makes Usyk look like a little guy. Let's say he drops Usyk. Let's say Fury comes out, trains hard after that Ngannou disaster, and decides he needs to redeem his reputation and blows out Usyk, who looks too small. Are you positive that Usyk, after one loss against the guy who dominated him, is going to want the rematch? Are you sure that the people in the background, the promoters, who would fund the rematch, would want to fund a rematch off a fight that looked like a dominant victory for the bigger man? I believe it's an open question on whether we get a Tyson Fury-Usyk rematch. Right? Understand, when you're dealing with an unbeaten fighter, the world changes when they lose that designation. Let me point out too, after the second Usyk-Joshua fight, Joshua was so overcome with emotion that he throws the belts into the crowd. He grabs the mic and starts talking about heavyweights in history. Folks, don't just look at the physical injuries boxers suffer. Think of the mental health injuries boxers suffer. Someone is going to lose their unbeaten status here. I'm not sure if the rematch takes place this year. Let's talk about another question. Danny Garcia against Erislandy Lara, a fight I consider a big fight. When are we going to get it? Right, folks, I've been hearing for months about this fight. Let's be clear here. You heard me call Canelo an all-time great. One of Canelo's toughest matches to date was his match against Erislandy Lara. Folks, I couldn't be the only one who thinks Lara won that fight. Let's talk about Danny Garcia. Folks, Danny Garcia has quietly put together a Hall of Fame career. Wasn't that Danny who beat Amir Khan? Who stopped Amir Khan? Folks, Danny's had some big fights. Wasn't that Danny beating El Terrible? Right? Danny, when we thought Errol Spence was the big bad wolf, goes the distance with Errol Spence. Look at the CompuBox numbers. Danny matches Errol Spence in power shots. Now, Errol Spence had the jab working. I'm not here to say Spence lost that fight, but what I am here to say is Danny has quite the resume, has fought many top-line boxers. Now he's gained weight. Understand, stylistically, Danny against Erislandy Lara is a fascinating fight. Lara is a mover who can deal with you from distance. Excellent jab, excellent movement. Danny is a mid-range hooker. Right? Stylistically, you wonder, will the fight be fought at long range or mid-range? As I recall, Erislandy Lara had a hard time at short range with Jarrett Hurd. But since Danny needs a little bit of a cushion, does that give Lara the room he needs to operate? Right, folks? I'd like to see that fight. I'd like to hear updates that involve more than delays, right? I understand the delay might have been necessary. PBC now has a deal with Amazon Prime, right? I think it's fair for PBC to say, hey, we're about to enter into a deal with Amazon Prime. Let's delay this fight a little bit so it can be on Amazon Prime. If that's the reason for the delay, okay, fine. I'm not going to argue. Let's also point out some other things too. Folks, middleweight is about to get a shot in the arm. Right now, it looks like a one-man show. Right now, Janabek looks like Marvin Hagler from the 1980s when Hagler was the man at middleweight and there was nobody else close to him. Right? Well, understand, Demetrius Andrade's coming back to middleweight. Right? Understand, Jamal Charlo is now back in the ring. Right? This Danny Garcia, Erislandy Lara fight hints at a future that could be interesting. Let's hope that fight happens. Let's add two more questions, and I see I'm running over on time. Right, the first, outside of Fury versus Usyk, is there a bigger fight in the heavyweight division than Anthony Joshua against Filip Hrgovic? I see everyone positioning themselves. I see the Joseph Parker people saying, hey, Parker wants another shot at AJ. Okay, fair enough. I get it. Right? I know Wilder was hoping for a shot at AJ. Right? What I want Anthony Joshua to think about is that you have the IBF title. I know they're going to keep it locked up with Usyk and Fury until after the first fight. But they're not going to fight for the IBF title unless that second fight gets canceled. Just food for thought. Right? Well, what I want AJ to think about is this is your opportunity to get a share of the title against a really dangerous opponent. Now, let me just be upfront here. I think Hrgovic wins that fight. I think the Hrgovic-Zhilei Zhang fight, quite frankly, is going to be like the Vitaly Klitschko, Lennox Lewis fight. It's going to age well. We're going to look back and we're going to say, wow, we got that fight before the guys blew up. I believe Hrgovic's a serious threat to anyone at the heavyweight level. I believe AJ looked magnificent in his last fight. I believe AJ has rebuilt himself. Right? A big question this year is, who's AJ going to fight next? Understand, AJ and Parker have both decided that they're going to fight several times a year to stay sharp. And they both look sharp right now. Is a sharp AJ going to risk it all against Filip Hrgovic? I hope the answer is yes. I think that fight is a hell of a fight. As much as I respect Joseph Parker, understand, this would be a heavyweight title fight. AJ against Hrgovic. Right? Understand, too, the winner of that fight will have huge opportunities. Right? Against the winner of Hrgovic, Fury, against Zhilei Zhang, against many of the other guys in the heavyweight division right now who are being shut out. Here's my sixth question. I know I'm in the minority here. I know many of you disagree with me. But some days you just have to be unpopular. When are we going to get a properly scored fight between Katie Taylor and Chantel Cameron in a neutral location like Saudi Arabia? Folks, it's 2023. I'm watching a fight. One woman's the champ. She won the first fight between the two of them. She knocks down the other woman. But this is boxing. The referee somehow misses the fact that it's a knockdown. Okay, fine. Right? Understand it's the champ who knocks down the challenger. The challenger should have been in a hole that she had to climb out of. Then as I watch the fight, and the champ gets cut, okay. As I watch the fight, I see the challenger, the woman who has to make the case that she's the champ, the woman who has to show us that she is in the process of beating the champ. I see the challenger, and the fight, of course, curiously, isn't in the champ's backyard. No, it's in the challenger's backyard. Right? This is one of those fights where the champ is being treated like the challenger. Right? The challenger is the one holding on to the champ. So imagine my surprise, and I said so in the post-fight video. Imagine my surprise when they're showing a sportsbook's live odds, and I'm seeing that the boxing public feels that the challenger's chances of winning the fight, in a fight in which she's excessively holding, in a fight in which the harder punches are being thrown by and landed by the champion. Imagine my surprise when the sportsbook odds start going Katie Taylor's way during the fight. It's even worse than that. The boxing announcer I'm listening to on my feed is praising Katie Taylor. The crowd, of course, it's in Ireland. Katie Taylor is Irish. The crowd is cheering for Katie Taylor just like they would cheer for a Jamaican in Kingston, Jamaica, right? I'm Jamaican. I don't mean pick on the Irish here. But understand, the crowd is cheering for the local fighter. Right, folks? In my opinion, that's not how Chantel Cameron should have lost her title. When you factor in the reality that the champ scores the one knockdown in the fight, when you factor in the reality that it's the opponent who's excessively holding the champ, I thought the end result was ridiculous. So you have big money fights, big money cards, day of reckoning taking place in Saudi Arabia. To the powers that be in boxing, please put Katie Taylor against Chantel Cameron on one of these blockbuster cards. I want both women to get paid. I want both women to get the exposure. But more importantly, I want a level playing field. I don't want a situation where every time Katie Taylor comes within 2 inches of Chantel Cameron, everyone is cheering. I want a real fight. I want real scoring. I want there to be an understanding that the person who actually wins the fight will have their hand raised at the end of the fight. Right? I give Katie Taylor a lot of credit for fighting tough fights. She fought Serrano. She's fighting Chantel Cameron. I give her a lot of credit for her courage. Right? But boxing should be binary. The winner should be declared the winner. Right? All of us shouldn't be looking the other way as Katie Taylor hits the canvas. I want real interviews of Katie Taylor too, where they ask tough questions like, were you knocked down in that round? Right? I mean, let's get real answers. I don't want some good-looking fighter smiling at the camera and being able to get away with knockdowns that weren't counted. Right, Katie? Tell us the truth. We're not going to hold it against you. Right? If you know in your heart that you were knocked down by Chantel Cameron, own up to it. If you know in your heart that you got some favorable treatment from fighting at home, that the fight may have been scored differently if it was in Cameron's backyard. Tell us about it and accept a fight in a neutral location. Right, folks? We've had 2 fights. We've had 2 fights in Katie Taylor's backyard. Does anyone think that's fair? Don't we want at least one fight in a neutral location? Food for thought. Food for thought. Those are my questions. I hope to have the boxing crowd here raise theirs in the comment section of this YouTube video. I hope you do. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know your questions. Just assume that people are listening. Thanks for stopping by. Happy New Year.